Imagine that you're going to go and buy a car. Not a new one that came from the 1970s. And you meet with the car salesman. Well, not this type of car salesman, more like this type of car salesman. And they show you the car and you think, wow, this looks quite nice. And you think, let's buy it. And you pull out the car park and you think to yourself, I've got a really good deal here. And it promises to be more affordable, cheaper, quicker, more agile. But only a mile down the road, we discover that the car isn't what was promised. The car wasn't brand spanking new. Instead, it was a model that was rehashed from the 1970s. The bumper had been stuck on with super glue. And whenever we voice concerns,
won't it fall off?
Definitely.
Isn't that dangerous?
Not to me.
We were told
is complete and utter rubbish. It's Project Fear Mark II.
So as you might have guessed, I'm not really talking about cars, I'm talking about Brexit. And an astonishing thing took place this week where someone from the government finally admitted that Brexit isn't working.
There's no doubt that what we warned about in advance of the referendum in terms of the impact on economic growth has come to pass.
But despite that realisation, guess what they want to continue doing? If you'd like to support this channel and keep it going, please click that like and subscribe button.
I want to talk a bit about the Green Paper, which was published today as well. This is a line from the foreword written by the Chancellor and Business Secretary. We're forging a closer relationship with the European Union, ensuring smoother trade and simpler processes for doing business. How's that going?
I'll answer this one, and it's bad. For exports of goods, well, they're below both exports to the EU and the rest of the world. They're below 11% when compared to 2019. Here's a list of financial institutions, companies and newspapers and universities that think this is a bad idea. The IMF, the OBR, the OECD, the Financial Times, Bloomberg, Washington Post, New York Times, Citigroup, Bank of England, Atlantic Council, The Economist, The Telegraph, The Times, Oxford University, Cambridge University, Cardiff University and Edinburgh University.
Well, I think there's an opportunity to, now that the dust really has well and truly settled on Brexit, the wrangling's over, the argument's finished, and actually there are new relationships. There's a new government here that isn't scarred by those experience of bitter Brexit negotiations. There are new players on the continent. I think there really is an opportunity to work more effectively together and build a new partnership.
There have definitely been a few people inside the European Union that have said that they want to do a bigger reset than what's being offered, which is part of the reason why they want this youth mobility scheme as part of their negotiations. Except the UK can't accept that because the right-wing press and a lot of right-wingers and Brexiteers don't like immigration.
Some people might be thinking, like, there's one market over here, there's another market over here. There's one way to ensure this, smoother trade and simpler processes, maybe having one market. I'm struggling to think of the word. Can you help me? Yeah,
I know, but I campaign passionately to remain in the European Union, but a referendum and 2 subsequent general elections settled that question.
Simply not true. The appetite is growing. It's about 60 to 67%, depending on the poll. This one from 2023 by Ominous is 61%. In fact, if you look at polling across the board from Delta, BMG Research, YouGov, Ominous, and a few others, you'll see that there's a lead somewhere between 10 and 17% of people for 2024 wanting to rejoin the EU.
This isn't about remaining in the European Union. There'll be some people genuinely who are thinking, why can't there be, and I'm not saying what's right or wrong here, but why can't there be an open debate about the single market, about the customs union, without this government trying to shut it down?
It's a good and interesting question, and it makes you wonder what polling data the Labour Party have, because it might be quite contrary, or there could be specific issues such as taking on the euro, or there could be some pushback from the European Union itself. It could even be the fact that they won an even bigger lead to absolutely make sure that we can go back in. It could also be that there is a need for the 2 biggest parties to want to rejoin the European Union before the European Union take us seriously.
Well, the debate has been taking place non-stop in the run-up to and since the referendum.
But it doesn't feel like it is now, though, does it?
Well, I know, because I think people have moved.
I think
people have moved on. The country's moved on. The EU's moved on. And let me tell you, not just here but in Brussels, there is no appetite to relitigate those arguments, to reopen things that have been settled.
That's not quite true. You've got France and Germany suggesting the idea of us becoming an associate member. I don't think people would take that on board because it would make you a rule taker, not a rule maker. Then have a look at this. People were asked in France, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Spain and Italy, what would they say to the UK being allowed to rejoin the EU? It's an overwhelming majority. Some aren't over 50%, but if you look at the no's compared to the yeses, they would overwhelmingly win. But again, we're being told that they don't want us back. I even did a series of videos where I toured around Europe asking the question,
what are your thoughts on Brexit?
And the feedback I was getting reflected that data. But then came a first, an admission that Brexit was damaging us.
Your own Green Paper says investment is reduced by 11% because of Brexit.
There's no doubt that what we warned about in advance of the referendum in terms of the impact on economic growth has come to pass.
Finally, an admission that it is a bunch of lies that were offered to us.
You will benefit from better care
Nothing in this country works anymore.
provided by our NHS thanks to the reallocation of funds from the EU budget.
The health service doesn't work.
Controlled immigration will lead to reduced waiting times for you and your loved ones.
The roads don't work.
You and your family will benefit from a resurgent economy.
None of our public services are up to scratch.
Politicians, both local and national, will become more accountable,
We are in decline.
especially those most damaged by EU policies like farming, fishing, and industries like steel.
We will only recover our position through economic growth.
A more prosperous and safer future awaits us outside the EU. A vote to leave is a vote for a brighter future for you, your family, and your community.
I think the sweet spot is working as closely with the European Union where we can, but also showing the agility to work with and through partners in other markets as well. And there is that sweet spot there to unlock.
No, there isn't. There is no sweet spot. It's damage. And it isn't just us in Britain. There's also Gibraltar, and the more we diverge, the more likely it is that it'll be necessary to put a hard border in. And a similar issue with Northern Ireland and Ireland. He is literally saying we have to stick with the broken down car. We have to accept the lies that were given to us. No one would do that with a product. So why are we doing it with the UK?
And that will be the agile way in which we work.
You're here because you want to talk about a deal that you struck with the world's largest pharmaceutical company. The boss of that company, David Ricks, made the Brexit point on Radio 4 today. He said the difference in the UK on your own now, separate from Europe, it's a relatively small market.
In fact, when you actually hear what Ricks had to say, it's quite chilling.
I think the difference in the UK is, on your own now, separate from Europe, it's a relatively small market. For most multinationals and certainly for Americans. So something needs to be quite different to make it interesting.
Can the difference be made up? You talk about us being a smaller market now. Can we persuade you to make the kind of investments you might have made if we were part of a bigger market?
Well, I think so. If we had in a hypothetical world, a market of this size that really encouraged innovation, not just in investment, but in utilization. Right, so that the system was set up to really take advantage of the breakthroughs in biomedical innovation, put them to work in the real world, study those effects so that globally that knowledge could be shared and really become kind of an incubator for access to these medications as well as utilization. That would be quite interesting.
Now, please correct me, any scientists out there that are wrong, but it just sounded as if the only way to make the UK an interesting place to invest is if we experiment on the population.
Right, so that the system was set up to really take advantage of the breakthroughs in biomedical innovation, put them to work in the real world, study those effects so that globally that knowledge could be shared.
And it sounds like our government have just accepted that deal.
You're here because you want to talk about a deal that you struck with the world's largest pharmaceutical company. The boss of that company, David Ricks.
Please let me know your thoughts in the comments.
The great thing for me about today's summit wasn't just the £63 billion that's been unlocked, the tens of thousands of jobs that will be created in every part of the country.
I'm all for the investment, but adding more jobs to the economy seems crazy at the moment. According to Statista, we are short of workers by almost 10%. Our birth rate has dropped to 156 and continues to drop. In fact, the birth rate being so low is so damaging that we're starting to see primary schools, even in London, closing because they don't have enough pupils. This doesn't even cover the issues that we're facing with migration. In June 24, Al Jazeera claimed 500,000 people had left the UK, which is a new record. In the last 3 years, with that figure included, we have seen 1.6 million people leave the UK. This is a brain drain on steroids. And everything stated by Wes Streeting in this interview, but also within the big announcements of the big business investment by Starmer this week, we are not seeing anything that addresses these issues.
Because when we get to the budget and the Chancellor's got difficult choices to make around tax and spending, we should not forget that those choices would not be so hard if Britain's economy was growing to the extent that it did under the last Labour government. And
as well as the 40 billion a year black hole we're getting because we're outside the EU.
Putting money back into people's pockets and investing in our public services using the proceeds of growth.
I'm all for business investment, but if he's not dealing with these problems, and another one being the price of housing in the UK, we do have serious issues that are not being addressed by this government. Over the last 100 days, I've attempted to be fair to the government to bear in mind of the problems that they've inherited. But now it's been over those 100 days, and this is a point of concern when they're not addressing the real issues. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Once again, thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters. You guys are awesome and you keep this channel going and growing. If you enjoyed today's video, please click that link and subscribe button.